Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Shopify is there to help you grow. Shopify helps you sell everywhere, from their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system. Shopify's got you covered. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms, and sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. What I love about Shopify is how no matter how big you want to grow, Shopify gives you everything you need to take control and take your business to the next level. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S., and Shopify is the global force behind Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined by Bob Phelan. Our co-host Nick Stevens is out this week. Bob and I are happy to be joined by Lance Brozdowski, who is here to help us break down all things Orioles pitching in tonight's episode. And later on this week, Bob and I will take your questions as part of our latest listener mailbag. But first, Orioles on the Verge is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all sports betting needs this season. From baseball, golf, soccer, right to all the top fights in UFC, MMA, and boxing. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today, get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, the game starts here. As we like to do at the top of every episode, we want to welcome a new member to our Patreon community, and with that, I will turn it over to Bob.
Yeah, actually, we got a guy in Patrick Cheaper. Sorry, it's a tough name to pronounce, but sign up for a year up front at the AAA level, so greatly appreciate that. Hope you enjoy the content, and thanks for your support.
With that, I'll introduce tonight's guest. He is a player development analyst over at Marquee Sports Network. You can also find his work on social media, particularly YouTube and X, and at Substack. He is Lance Brozdowski. Lance, glad to have you on.
Thanks for having me, guys. Excited to get going. Talk some O's.
We've been a big fan of your work for a long time here, so we're happy to have you. And we'll just jump right in here with a question that is on a lot of fans' minds, especially Orioles fans right now, in the light of Kyle Bradish going down with Tommy John surgery, and that is pitching injuries. Although there doesn't seem to be a clear consensus on the one thing or one things that has caused the recent rash of injuries, what are some of the factors being attributed to the increase we've seen this season or over the last year or so?
Yeah, I mean, the main one's just velocity. I think at the end of the day, throwing a baseball hard is going to lead to injury. It's a matter of trying to figure out ways to mitigate that as an organization. The problem is this runs immediately counter to what a lot of teams have probably learned from a stuff perspective, which is that velocity is probably going to get hitters out at a higher rate. And that's what you see the contraction of the league going towards the shorter pitchers and not extending starters out as much. It's because of exactly this, right? We want more velocity. It's probably harder to hold it into games. So we'll incentivize guys who can get to the bases with high velo, don't really have developed mixes, and then go from there. You know, with Bradish in particular, I like Keith Meister's had some thoughts on this. I don't know exactly how one-to-one that is backed up based on a lot of the people that I've talked to in the sport who are on team side and working with the pitchers on a daily basis. But sweepers that are thrown hard, it seems like maybe there's some connection there. But again, the problem is that all the best sweepers are the ones that are 85 plus with 10 plus horizontal. Bradish has had one of the best sweepers in baseball. I just wonder whether it's like inevitable that a guy who throws like an 87 mile per hour sweeper is going to pop at some point. And as a team that is really good at developing pitching, it has a backfill of starters all the time. I mean, you got Povich up, a couple more stars in the minors I like. They're sharp, I think, all around on the hitting and pitching side. I obviously you want Bradish in the rotation, but when a team builds up like this, they have replacements. And I think they'd rather take really good Bradish on a per inning basis than maybe slightly worse Bradish with a different sweeper or something along those lines. There's also the point of just some guys like Bradish learned the sweeper. It's so good. It's like, I don't know. He probably wants to throw that pitch to be better. It's going to be hard to tell Bradish, hey, man, this pitch we think maybe increases your injury risk by like 2 to 6%. but it's a really good pitch. What do you want to do? He's probably, I'm just going to get hitters out and then hopefully stay healthy, and then he doesn't. And it's a snowball effect. It's tough. It's a really tough problem to solve. I don't really understand. I don't think there's any good proposal out there as to how to solve it. I think it's just going to continue. I think you have to just really incentivize starting pitching and push velocity down. You have to disincentivize velocity, which is going to be very hard to do. The only idea I think that's reasonable is a double hook. And I'd say they have to push it out to probably like 18 batters before you lose your DH, 18 outs, before you lose your DH. That might put a little bit of emphasis back on the starter and push velo back down. That's really the only way I see fixing things. But until then, I'm just, I don't know. There's nothing really we can do about it on the media side or anything. I'm just going to enjoy really good pitching. And Brash was the fun guy to watch. And unfortunately, we'll probably see him in another year. I don't know has he had TJ confirmed there or anything? Yeah.
He had the Tommy John plus internal brace, so hopefully that will, keep him from needing it again anytime soon at least. But yeah, it's like you said. I mean, I'm sure he wants to get paid a big contract one day, and you need those elite pitches to be able to do that. And a team like the Tampa Bay Rays, I always think of when I hear pitcher injury, next man up, and then just get the next guy to perform as well. So yeah, it's interesting. The pitch clock, I feel like, is just bad timing and gets a lot of blame. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pitch clock definitely had some effect. I just think guys adapt to it pretty quick. So it probably had a greater effect last year than it will this year, and then even less of an effect in subsequent years, So it's just the basic principle of like doing more work in a shorter period of time, especially if you haven't adjusted your off-season programming at all to adequately take on that added load, so to speak, because your time intervals are shorter. Like, that's obviously going to have some effect. It's crazy to think it doesn't. It's just a matter of the work that you put in to actually mitigate that. And I think teams are starting to realize that more and more. So the further we get away from the inception of that, the less I think it'll have of an impact. But at the end of the day, it's velocity for me.
Yeah. Velocity plus spin. I think Eno Sarah said on Rates and Barrels, which makes a lot of sense. And I'll move on now to another guy with great stuff who has been a little inconsistent this year in his first full season, but Grayson Rodriguez. From what you've seen from him, are the hopes that he'll still eventually develop into an ace that a lot of people expected him to do?
Yeah, I still really like Grayson Rodriguez. I was a pretty big fan coming into this season. He's only 24 still. He's really a pitcher. I like what he does, from a velocity standpoint and shape standpoint. He's an interesting guy that I've tracked a bit this year, where he's starting to throw his curveball more now. Kind of play it around. We had that preseason nugget of like, I'm going to throw a sinker more, and he hasn't really done that totally. So I always wonder, and we'll run into this a bit with Burns. I don't mean to jump your rundown here, but we'll talk about him. But with a lot of these guys, I almost wonder, teams that have like stronger postseason aspirations, it's not to me like the guy can just do the exact same throughout the course of an entire season, like usage wise and everything. I think you just have these natural pockets of like ebb and flow in usage, like Grayson up with his curveball. Burns had more slider in the month of May, then he's backed off and started to throw the sinker more. You just like get these ebbs and flows where you just go through waves of using certain pitches in certain spots. And like sometimes it's matchup based and it makes sense, but I also wonder whether other times it's just purely to introduce new pitches and different pitches, such that when you get to the postseason, it's not as like, oh, this guy did the exact same thing for the entire year. It's like, oh, this guy did 5 different things over the course of 6 months. Like, it's probably going to be harder from a game prep standpoint to figure out what you want to do from an attack. But I love Grayson. Like, the thing that I think again, I'm not as tapped into the Orioles community as you guys are, but both Grayson and Dean Kramer kind of changed their sliders this offseason, pulling down velo a little, adding a bit of sweep and drop. And that was kind of like a subtle thing. I know Dean's, I think, is tracked as a cutter or something, but it's a slider to me. And that's an interesting tweak as well. Grayson did the same thing. The pitch has done a pretty good job of succeeding in that respect. I wonder whether that's just an overall trend that the Orioles see, is that they like that shape better. I think certain orgs just have certain shapes they lean towards for whatever reason, and the O's seem to be really on that shape. There's a couple other guys in the org that throw it too. But yeah, he's made some tweaks. I want more sinker there. I still really think that's probably how he takes another leap. Like, you've seen that even with a guy like Glass now in LA, where he goes over to the Dodgers and starts throwing a sinker more to righties. Like, Grayson's sinker looks good, in my opinion. I just don't think he's thrown it enough. And his fastball is fine, but it's still it's still like more of an average pitch versus right-handed hitters. I really think that like pushing that fastball up away and opening up sinker in or third would really help him. So I wonder whether that's something that's like a late season plan and not something that he's going to immediately do right now. But that's kind of the development action I'd keep an eye on for him if I was to predict.
Yeah, I feel like that was something that Bradish did last year, was introduce that sinker, and I feel like a lot of pitchers pitching savvy teams are doing 2 fastballs for a lot of guys, and it seems to be really helping.
No doubt. That's definitely an approach I think a lot of teams are taking. They're starting to realize I think that mixing is super important and a variety of other things. But just that 4 seams get beat, even good 4 seams, especially behind in the count, just get beat. And adding a sinker is a really low-risk thing that I think improves both the 4 seam and pushes down overall damage. So it just sometimes takes the league a bit to catch up to these things. But I know the Orioles are on stuff like that. I mean, they've been on stuff like that with Wells and some of the other guys. So it might just be a matter of time before Grayson throws that sinker more.
Makes sense.
The Orioles traded for Corbin Burnes this offseason expecting an ace, and by all metrics, they got one. With that said, do you see any red flags with him as we approach the second half? His strikeouts are down a bit, but could he also improve on his performance to date as we get further into the season?
I mean, he's been pretty good. I think he's kind of in the running for Cy Young, in my opinion, based on looking at some of the stats the other day and some of the odds and whatnot. But I get their strikeout rates down slightly, but his walks are also down too. You know, the peripherals are fantastic. They're not like 2021 Burnes where he had a career year, but I think they look pretty great overall. The interesting thing there to me is like last season was getting beat up early in the year, hits the All-Star break, and is like, I'm tired of this. I'm going to throw a sinker and add a sweeper to righties, and like just took off towards the end of the season. I was curious to see what the Orioles were going to do in terms of shapes this year with him, and we saw immediately from the jump that he threw away the sweeper and basically backed off the sinker pretty heavily for the first 2 months of the season. And now we're starting to see that sinker come back. I've seen occasional sweepers here and there that I don't think are tracked as sweepers, but they have the movement of the old sweeper he used to throw, which is a disgusting pitch. But he's interesting in that respect, where same idea with Grayson, right? I was just talking about it. Like, you have these things in his pocket that he could go to if he needs, that he showed are great pitches last year. And I just wonder whether he's like an ebb and flow with things. He was throwing a slider like a ton in May, and he's backed off that and started to elevate the sinker usage. So I just love thinking and tracking these like month-to-month changes in guys and what they're doing and why they might be doing it, and thinking about like how hard it is to get past 190 innings with like a sub 3.5 ERA, which you have to do from a mix and velo and usage and pitch depth standpoint. And Burnes is such a good pitcher. I think he's one of the best pitchers in baseball. I don't see really any reason, I mean, is he going to be sub 2.5 for the entire season? No, he wasn't even that in 2021, but so maybe you see a little regression come, but he's still like a well above league average pitcher. I mean, even if he puts up like a 3 ERA rest of the season, he'll still end up high 2s, and that's going to be a heck of an acquisition for the team.
Yeah, he seems like a tinkerer, so hopefully, he'll continue to adjust as the year goes on. Do you think that just even having him in the clubhouse, in the pitching room with the rest of these guys like Bradish, Kramer, all the pitchers, Grayson, is that, you think, carry a long-term effect? Does that help a young pitcher out?
I think it does, because Burnes was bad. Burnes was like really bad in 2019. Was that he had like an 8.8 ERA? Like, he was a terrible pitcher. It's like I almost like looking at the guys that are terrible. I was doing this with Hunter Brown earlier in the year from the Astros, who got just destroyed for a couple months. And they were like, we need to change everything. And he added a stinker, stopped throwing a pitch that he added this offseason, and that weird cutter thing, jacked up his curveball usage, moved on the rubber, and just like became an entirely new being. And I love keying in on those pitchers that are so bad that you almost like have to make a tweak. And I just think it opens up the possibility for a lot more upside. I almost want more pitchers who are meddlingly average to make tweaks, like with accepting some risk that they might get worse, but making sure you calculate the fact that they could actually get better and you could turn them into like a much better starter than they've been in the past. So I'm very pro tweaks, especially if a guy's average. But yeah, I mean, I just think he's a guy that anyone who's bad can go to and view him as like, maybe he could become that. Like, maybe you're not. Like, Burnes is a very unique pitcher, but it's not like the Orioles had bad pitchers either. But I just think any vet in a clubhouse who's struggled as much as he has and now has turned into one of the best pitchers in baseball has to have some benefit anecdotally to the team.
Jewelry can say many things on your wedding day. As a wedding band, it can say, "This is a forever symbol of our forever love." As a gift to your wedding party, it can say, "Thanks for standing up there with us." Blue Nile can help you find the piece that says it all and says it beautifully, with expert guidance and a wide assortment of jewelry of the highest quality at the best price. Go to BlueNile.com and experience the convenience of shopping Blue Nile, the original online jeweler since 1999. That's BlueNile.com.
Yeah, maybe the silver lining to Bradish and Grayson, who got off to pretty bad starts their first 8 to 10 appearances in the majors, to be able to make those adjustments. And another guy who's come up, and tonight he made his, fourth or fifth major league start, Cade Povich. Coming into the season, we weren't sure how much time he would get in the majors. Orioles rotation looked pretty deep. Didn't see much room for him, but here we are, and seems like he'll be in the rotation the rest of the year. He gets compared to Max Fried a lot, and I think there was even a pitching ninja side by side with them in their deliveries. Is that an apt comparison?
I actually don't like that comparison. I think aesthetically it makes a lot of sense, but they're very different pitchers in my opinion, especially if you go under the hood and look at shapes and stuff. Fried cuts the heck out of his fastball. The better comp for Fried's like a Justin Steele in a way, where they both have really, really cut fastballs and work breaking balls off that. Povich looks like Fried from a mechanic standpoint. I'll give Ninja that. Rob's a friend. But they're just very different pitchers. Like, I get he has the curveball too, but he's a cutter changeup guy. He works more like outer third of the plate up away, throws his changeup kind of up in the zone, tunnels it off the four seam, works cutter up, which it seems like he's dropped the usage on a bit. It's getting beat up a little in the majors. But yeah, I mean, I get why you make the Fried comp there. There's probably a better comp out there. I actually don't know if there's a better comp out there. Maybe like Patrick Sandoval just went down with an injury, but that's kind of a guy I think about with like a decent changeup that he works up in the zone a bit. But yeah, I mean, it's a different pitcher. Like, he's a very outer third focused guy. I wonder whether that cutter needs to get a little harder and be moved inside. Fried is a guy who just jams inner third. Like, he's forcing up in, curveball, sweeper, slider thing he throws down in, and then some changeups away and such. And he also throws like 6 pitches, I think, to righties. Povich is a little more of like a 4-pitch guy. So I'm not the biggest fan of that comp, but I think Povich, and I think it's a testament to Povich though. He's a unique pitcher, and Fried is a really unique pitcher too. I think it's just sometimes really hard to comp these weird lefties we have. There's not a lot of good left-handed starting pitchers, although we're seeing more of them, and each of them seem to succeed in their own way. So it's hard to find comps. Righties, you could find comps until the end of time, but Povich is a unique guy. I like his mix. I think he's a good pitcher. Not sure maybe what the ultimate upside is. The fastball quality is not like plus. It's more probably average, even below. But he's more of like a mixed guy, locations guy, so he's really got a home to command. But he looks good to me. I think I do like a top 40 prospect list in my Substack, and I had him off in my recent update coming into the season, but I'm putting together my update right now, and he was a guy that I like retrospectively looked at quick and was like, hey, he probably should have been like a 30 to 40 overall. And one of the, an interesting prospect that it could have some impact, and O's have done a good job with him, I think.
Yeah, he does show a lot of poise on the mound, and I think he actually threw some sinkers tonight for the first time. So be curious to see how he adjusts.
Looking at Povich, I think that Orioles fans are so far have to be happy with what he has done. But do you think that he realistically can stick in the rotation even into September?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I got to look at the depth chart right now, but Kramer's on his way back, right? So he'll take the spot over Povich. I think I'd have Povich over Suarez. So would that make Povich your 5th? I don't know if you guys agree with that.
Yeah, I think so.
So then I guess he's your 5 until, I don't know, like maybe are they a trade candidate for someone? I'm not entirely sure. They have like a couple frontline guys to work with. You probably do want more of like a stable 3 or 4 for the playoffs, right? Like, you're rolling Burns and Grayson as much as you can in a 7-game series. But then you run into like the 3. You're confident in Cole Irvin, So, yeah, maybe they are a trade candidate. I mean, he lines up right now as the 5 until Kramer comes back, and then it's a matter of Suarez or Povich could go into the pen. So, I could see him as a starter. I also don't mind like the development that he's getting. Like, I do think we're running into massive gaps between AAA and the majors to the point where I almost love these situations where you're getting a guy an extended look. Like, I just think it helps a lot. You guys have done this with Kjerstad a bit, where he's been up and down, not really getting playing time. And he's been fine at the major league level, but I just think there's certain guys where it's like your major league team's so loaded, the guy clearly doesn't have anything else to do at AAA. They're just kind of like, you just don't really know what to do overall. You're just like, we can't play you up here, but we know you should be up here in order to get better. So you're just going to stay neutral until something happens injury-wise and we can find a spot. So I guess that's a roundabout way of saying, yeah, Povich is probably the 5 for now, but we'll see if that's the case post-deadline.
Yeah, we're accumulating quite a few of those guys more and more as time goes on.
It's interesting you mentioned Cole Irvin because that's a guy that we wanted to bring up. He got off to a great start this season and really helped the Orioles stabilize things over the first 6 weeks or so. But it's fair to doubt whether he's a guy that you want to run out there with the season on the line. And as you get into October, what is the best role for him moving forward the rest of the season?
Yeah, it's probably some like matchup lefty who can start occasionally and stuff. Like his mix is kind of interesting. He's played around with some new pitches, like I don't mind him. He's more like I don't know, he isn't comp to Fried, but he's like a mixed lefty. Fried is like an elite mixed lefty where it's like everything's so good and he's unique. Irvin's more just like, I don't really have a dominant pitch, so I have to throw 4 or 5 pitches to righties in order to get him out as a lefty. I like him. I think he's an interesting pitcher, like the curveball's good. Apart from that, I don't really know if there's much else in that mix that works. So like he to me feels like the guy you just really got to match up against a bad lefty team. The problem as you get deeper into the teams that are good that you're probably facing in the postseason and stuff and good matchups is like most of those teams are pretty good versus left-handed pitching. Like the worst teams in baseball versus left-handed pitching are like the Marlins and the White Sox. It's like neither of those teams are really competitive. It's like of course he'll match up with those teams if he has to and dominate them, but yeah, he feels like a matchup lefty to me. I imagine the velo would tick up in a relief role too. Maybe he's like a long man in that case. But again, for now, he's like in your rotation, and you could do worse than him. Like he's had historically better results than like a Dean Kramer, which I was a bit surprised when I looked at least underlying wise in terms of like FIP and stuff. And this year he looks a little bit better through like 70 or so innings. A strong improvement from last year, which it doesn't really jump out to me in any way like what he's doing differently. He's just throwing a lot more curveball. Seems to be landing that. So yeah, I'm pro throwing more breaking ball in a situation where you can actually land a pitch for strikes. So yeah, he's interesting. I don't know. He's just like a depth arm to me, where the best teams in baseball turn these depth arms into like 3-5 ERA pitchers over 75 innings. That's what they always do. That's what good teams do. So it's like I don't know if you really need to like introspect too much into like what's Cole Irvin's role long term, et cetera. It's just like he's a guy. He's just a guy to somehow get 0.8 runs above league average production over a decent sample because you can mix them, you have really good game planning, good catcher, etc. So this is what sharp teams do, and it probably frustrates a lot of orgs in baseball is how you turn a Cole Irvin into a sub 3.5 guy. So it's impressive work.
Yeah, you need quality innings in the regular season, right? Obviously, you want your aces in the playoffs, but you got to fill those innings somehow. I guess a guy like Irvin is a good way to do that. And speaking of Dean Kramer, how important is it for the Orioles to get a healthy Dean Kramer back to stabilize the back end of the rotation? And if the Orioles do acquire another pitcher in the starting rotation, could his stuff play up in the bullpen even better?
Yeah. Kramer's always a guy that I liked. I played some fantasy, and he was a guy that I was kind of targeting this season because I seem to always run into situations where I was looking at his box scores and being like, he had a really good outing. He like goes 7 Ks 10. He has like these weird upside outings. The problem, conversely, with like a guy like Cole Irvin is Irvin doesn't allow a lot of home runs, and Kramer's running some home run problems. This is not as good versus lefties, and I think that's been part of his plight, so to speak. But yeah, I like Kramer a bit. Again, like I'm very curious to see what this team does from a roster construction standpoint in the postseason. Like Kramer, I think throws a little harder than Irvin. If I'm looking, yeah, definitely throws harder than Irvin. So like he ticks up to 95 in a pen roll. Like I like that a lot. I'd probably just be a little careful to match him up against lefties. Or match him up against lefties where his shapes work a little better. Whereas like Cole Irvin, I don't really know if he's as like leverage over relief guy. He's probably like a back end rotation guy if you get into playoff situations. But again, like both of them as starters, I don't mind. Like they're getting you league average production. Some fall off in Kramer's forcing this year, etc. And the velo slightly down. Maybe that's tied to some of the injury stuff. But I still like him. Splitter this year for him too, which is new, I believe. I love that adjustment. He also, as I mentioned earlier, is one of these guys who kind of tweaked his cutter thing. I call it a slider. I think he calls it a cutter, so it's tracked as a cutter. But the pitch got a little slower, picked up more sweep too, and it's been a strong pitch for him overall. So they're always tinkering with these guys, and I don't mind them trying to stay ahead of the curve with some of the adjustments the league might make back to the individual pitchers.
Albert Suarez has been a great story to this point in the season, but his last few starts have been shaky at best, and it seems like even on his good nights, he's having to get by with 1 or 2 pitches. Can he rebound if he stays in the rotation, or would he be better served to work out of the bullpen the rest of the way?
Yeah, Suarez to me is like kind of just a pure fastball guy. And I get the peripherals look really strong there right now. It's just, I think the pitch is good. I don't know if it's that good. It's a bit unique in terms of being like pretty two-plane, has a lot of arm side movement and carry to it. not a lot of pitches like that in baseball. He's a bigger dude. Like, they made some cool adjustments with him that I honestly had no idea who he was in spring. And then I remember an individual texting me about him, and I was like, who on earth is that? Like, and it's like, of course, the Orioles made him into like a reasonable starter. He's got great results. But yeah, I see him more as a pen guy because I don't want to say he's like Robert Suarez from the Padres is like a guy who just throws like 80% four seam. And his four seam is a different shape than Suarez's. Like, he's carrying the ball really nicely and he gets up to 100. Like, Suarez isn't going to do that, but you can maybe look at him as like a light version of that kind of pitcher, Robert Suarez, where it's like heavy fastball usage, again, matchup based on who you think that shape works better against, slightly platoon neutral in some of what he throws, so it works in matchup situations if you had to go lefty-righty and you're running into a postseason situation. And if he ticks up too in pen, right, if he's more 96 in pen, then like I'd be super in on that. Like, I like the change up there. It's fastball change up, so you can mitigate some of the damage to lefties, as I said, but I see him more as like a pure fastball guy. I'm more confident that like an Irvin or a Kramer actually can stick in rotation and give you better long-term results, although I get the results for Suarez have been a bit better recently.
Yeah, I'll combine our next two questions kind of here. If the Orioles need to dip into their farm system again beyond Cade Povich for rotation help, what can Orioles fans expect from guys like Chase McDermott, Brandon Young, even a guy like Tucker Davidson, who's he's been having some success in AAA. I don't know what his upside is, but particularly Brandon Young, who you wrote about recently. What do you think his ceiling is as a major league starter?
Yeah, Brandon Young's a bit frustrating. I'll tell you this because I was looking at him in the minor leagues. I was talking to another analyst, and they were like, "What do you have on Brandon Young?" And I didn't really know who he was. I knew he was coming off injury and stuff. And I was like, I took a look, and it was, or no, I don't think he came off injury. He's just, all right, maybe he was an injury a couple years ago. I might be mixing up my players here.
Yeah, he had a shoulder.
It was injury, right? Yeah, there we go. I'm looking at Chase McDermott and thinking about Young, which is not a good idea. So, anyways, Young in the minors, when I was looking at his fastball shape, it was awesome. Like, he's a big dude, and he gets down the mound pretty well. So the release height's like artificially low is what I like to call it, where it's like it looks average-ish from a release standpoint, but when you factor in the fact that he's a big dude, like it plays a little differently. This is like the Paul Skeens problem, I'll call it, where it's like he's huge and his release height's average, but he's full sidearm and he's short extension. So like that release height is just, it looks different from the body. I think that's maybe something we miss sometimes with just generic release points. It's like we see the release point, like you could get to an average release point in a variety of different ways. And I just think certain ways have impact on stuff. And for Brandon Young, I loved it because like his fastball was up to like 19 inches of vert in the minors. And then he gets up to AAA, starts using a Major League Baseball, and the vert's down like 2 inches. So I like saw that, and I was like so bummed that I was texting the person that I was asking about that, and he's like, "Yeah, the minor league ball they use below AAA is like a non-Major League Baseball, and it honestly mimics a bit of what you run into in like NCAA, where the movement is crazy." I'm doing some like draft prep right now for MLB Network stuff I'm doing, and like so many of these guys have shapes that are just impossible in the majors. Like I'm just expecting them to cut off movement. It must be something with the ball flight or the seams or how it picks up drag, etc. The balls just move more. And it's the same thing in the minors. It's inconsistent in terms of how pitchers are affected, which is the most frustrating. Or it's inconsistent to me. Maybe an org knows which guys are going to be affected in certain ways. So I still like Brandon Young. I think he's a good pitcher, but I unfortunately like him a little less because the four seam carries down. Like it's still generating swing and miss. I still think there's some unique release traits there in terms of his body, but it's not 20 inches, 19 inches of vert from his slot anymore. It's more like 18, 17. He's averaging like 17.5 right now. So like maybe there's a way for the Orioles to hack it and get it up a little. Like I was super in on him. I was like, man, this guy's probably like a top 20 pitch prospect in baseball. And now I'm like, yeah, he's probably like top 40, like let's pump the brakes slightly. I still like the overall mix, and maybe I'm correcting too hard, but I'm curious to see if his name's popped more in other lists. It seems like everyone's kind of off him. I haven't really heard too much about him, although like his results were so good. It's like I'd be a bit surprised if he's not on some lists come update time for prospect lists.
I do want to ask a little bit about McDermott in a minute, but you brought up the baseball, which is something we've heard repeatedly. What a challenge that is for pitchers as they make the jump from AA to AAA. And we know that, as you just brought up, that the way the college baseball is made tends to make it easier for pitchers. If you had your way, how would you remedy this? Would you use one ball in the minors and one ball in the majors? Would you use a major league ball earlier in the minor leagues? How would you handle it?
Cost agnostic, everyone gets a Major League Baseball. I mean, it's that simple. You'd get an accurate movement and guys wouldn't have to adjust. It's just that it costs a lot of money. So I thought I heard that there was some kind of proposal to use them at AA. It's just it got shot down. I don't exactly know why. But I think that's going to come up every year from the PD guys. It's just the problem is like the PD guys, it's kind of like the amateur guys in baseball where until they were unionized, they just always got the short end of the stick. I'm speaking for all the PD people I know here that I'm friends with, but like front office people are just get paid more and are just higher profile and probably have more decision-making power. I don't know how much they're like the PD guys are like the grinders, you know what I mean? Like those guys are chilling in the minors at cities that aren't as nearly as nice as major league cities and put in the work. And for some reason, I just don't think they get respected as much. They have a huge impact on players' development and they just don't get as great of, I don't know. I don't want to say resources, but they don't get the benefit of these tiny things. Like if someone in the MLBPA wanted to make this a priority, they could, and it could be changed very quickly. Like I don't know what the cost interval would be to increase. Like I don't know. I have no idea on the dollar figure there for them to use Major League Baseball as a AA. But yeah, it's as simple as just use Major League Baseballs everywhere. And I don't know why college is using metal bats still. Like that's preposterous to me because I've been looking at some of those exit velocity numbers and they're hilarious. It's just unbelievable. You have like multiple guys hitting balls like 118 a day, and it's like, come on, like we have like 4 hitters in Major League Baseball that can do that. Like none of these guys are going to come close to 117 plus when they get to the majors. It's just, I don't know. Like there's just it's not even an integrity thing. Like I don't mind the offensive environment, but there's a pendulum to it, right? Like you want it somewhere in the middle. It's like the major leagues right now swinging way towards pitching, and the college is like the complete other side. It's so weird. So yeah, just Major League Baseball's everywhere. It would make me very happy.
Focusing on McDermott for a moment, because we get this question a lot from our listeners, and I wanted to ask you, is there a path for McDermott to get to the major leagues this year? And that's come up a lot because he's at AAA. He's probably the top Orioles pitching prospect left in the minor leagues if you don't count Povich. And he's going to be Rule 5 eligible after this season. But if and when he does make the major leagues this year, do you see him more as a starter or as a reliever, maybe even if it's a short-term thing before they push him back to the rotation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I like McDermott a lot. Like, I think he's an interesting pitcher. I think I snuck him onto my top 40. Might have just been off. He's another guy who's like kind of more average velo than plus velo. He's a guy that I like. If you could give him a tick, everything would look so much better. But maybe you run into then more walk issues than he's already had in terms of finding zone on some certain things. The good thing is that he has like multiple pitches he could throw to either handedness. He's like a 5-pitch guy, decent cutter, sweeper off that. I like the change up there. Like there's a curveball that is good. It's like he's the classic like I'm gonna bully righties with like 4-seam cut sweep, and then to lefties I'm gonna like give you 5 pitches 10% plus, 4 pitches 10% plus, and make it work that way. And I think that's a model to use, especially in your guys' park that. You really want to mitigate contact as much as you can to lefties, and like righties, you can do whatever you want. Like just throw sweepers over the middle of the plate and let them try to hit it out to left field, So I like McDermott. I think there's a non-zero chance that McDermott comes up and is actually better than like Irvin Kramer and some of these other guys. And I'm not gonna like hang my hat on that, but he's had really good performance in the minors. I think he's a really tough guy to barrel. I wonder how deep he'd go into games. He's always run into kind of more walk problems and stuff. But again, like. I wonder how much of that is him also adjusting to like the ABS and stuff. That's another thing that's a little weird. Where it's like I see the walk rates there and I say he has control problems. But like, does he actually have control problems? Like, does he come up and all of a sudden find the zone better? Because like the minor leagues, the AAA zone has been a bit weird. It's tighter than it was in prior years, so everyone's walk rates are going up. It doesn't really help pitchers. So maybe his regression in walks this year. I think he had a slight regression, right? Yeah, he's jumped like 2-3 percentage points. Like. Maybe that falls back down, and then in that case, like I'm right about him probably being better than Kramer and Irvin. So I think there's a path for him. Like I'd be a bit surprised if he doesn't get up at some point this year, especially with some of the injuries they've run into. Maybe there's just a point at which like they get tired of Suarez in a starter role, or a Povich is struggling too much, and they give Chase a chance. And there's really no one else to back that up. Like you have Means and Wells on the 60-day, Bradshaw on the 60-day, and then you get Kramer back. So there's a point here in the next 2 to 3 months. Where Chase to me is a better pitcher and option than one of Irvin, Suarez, or Povich, and as a result of that, we're going to get to see what he looks like in the rotation. So, I like the upside there. I think he's a good pitcher, and I'm cautiously optimistic that he can impact the team down the stretch.
Yeah, there was actually a Baseball America article that came out recently and talked about how the pitchers who were affected by the ABS system, and I believe Chase McDermott was. On that list. So hashtag give Chase a chance. You heard it here first from Lance Brozdowski. Are there any arms that should be available at the trade deadline that seem like a good fit for the Orioles, considering the types of things that the Orioles seem to like in their pitchers? I know one of my favorites right now that I'm hoping the Orioles can acquire is Eric Fetty from the White Sox.
Oh, that's what I was going to go with, yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, took it right out of my mouth. Yeah, Fetty's a name that I've heard. I mean, it just makes a lot of sense. He's a one-year contract that team needs to sell. Like, if they don't trade Crochet, they're going to trade. They have to trade Fetty. It'd be hilarious if they don't. But it's just a matter of where he goes and like what the price tag is. You know, like it's probably like a non-40 low-level prospect. So it's something that like I guess it's like everyone submit your non-40 prospect that is kind of interesting, and the White Sox will rank him and take the best. So there's no point, in my opinion, for like the O's to overpay on him. It's more a matter of like, do they have the prospect the White Sox want that the O's are willing to give up? It's one of those like match things as opposed to best offer, you know? So I'm curious to see. Like, I think Fetty would make sense. Yeah, I mean, he's fun, sweeper change, sinker, added some velo, very different pitcher than when he was overseas. He looks great. I like just also what he's done from a mix standpoint in terms of adapting, and I think it fits a bit in terms of some of the O's philosophies and stuff. I don't know if there's any other names that really jump out to me aside from him. I'd have to kind of look through like who's available. I haven't really locked on deadline stuff yet. It's probably like more of that might be a post-draft thing for me, and at that point it might be a bit too late. So, I mean, I'd love for them to go after like a Crochet. That'd be sweet. Like I love Crochet. I think he's a great pitcher. I have no idea on the health side there, but if the O's are going to go after, if the O's can put a package, if Crochet is going to get dealt to any team, it makes a lot of sense for it to be a team that has expendable prospects. So like they just line up. I think there's very few teams I think they'd line up for a Crochet trade on, and it's probably one of like 3 teams. It's probably like the O's, the Phillies, Dodgers, and maybe there's one more team I'm missing. You know, like I don't know who else would be able to actually put up the prospect package they probably want and not be like completely depleted on the farm side. So I don't know what they package for him. Maybe they give him like a Kierstad and a couple other players, and you know, one of these young arms. We're talking about like a Baumeister, Brandon Young, or something along those lines, and then they get Crochet for another year of control after this year. So I'd love to see a Crochet. That'd be a game changer for a postseason run. But also, I mean, another thing that I'm missing here is the fact that like I don't exactly know how many innings he's going to throw. So it's like you might actually have him for the postseason run, which is part of the reason I think why that maybe isn't going to get done, because like they're probably going to want a big package, and all the playoff teams who can get him are like, well, I don't know. Is he probably like, we don't know his medicals. We don't know how stretched he is. Like, where is he in his, like, can he get to 130? And if so, is he going to blow out next year? And then we just gave you all these prospects for someone that doesn't matter. So anyways, a lot of Crochet talk there, but yeah, Fetty'd be great. We line up on that one, Bob.
Yeah, cool. Last question for me is, you put out something today. I didn't even know you knew anything about hitters. I thought you were, all you know is pitching. No, you put out a cool video today. Is there any highlights from an Orioles perspective you could shout out to the hitting development?
I'd have to pull it up quick. I don't think I have it on top of my head.
Oh, shoot.
But I don't think they jumped out for better or worse, which is probably okay. Like, if you're in the middle of the pack, then I think you're fine. I do think they have, like, Ryan O'Hearn is still a crazy story to me. Like, that dude just barrels everything, and the Royals just kind of gave up on him. So, I mean, I think they have a good – I mean, I would not knock their approach from the hitting standpoint, even if they ended up average. There's just certain teams that could either have general pedigree that may not line up with what was actually in that video, which I encourage you to check out. But,
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm going to try to pull up the results here. They're top – yeah, they're like middle of the pack in kind of everything. They're like right around average in xWOBA. They lift the ball a good amount, which I think is a good indicator of like being a sharper org from a mindset standpoint. Yeah, they're second highest in fly ball right there. You go. That's probably a good nugget, right? Lift ball, hit the ball hard. So yeah, discipline was fine on them. I don't know where they were on swing miss. Yeah, right around average in swing miss. So yeah, positive signs there, I'd say overall. The problem with that is like so high level sometimes that you miss some of the nuance. So some of the good orgs, like the O's, I think are a good hitting development org, clearly based on some of the major league talent they developed. You know, even if they don't pop on this, it doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that, unfortunately, in the aggregate, they just don't do anything unique enough for me to talk about it in the video. So it's a low bar, but yeah, O's development I think is fine on both facets for sure. It's probably honestly top 10 in both hitting and pitching from my perspective. So
very cool.
Well, Lance, we really appreciate you taking the time to offer your insight tonight. And can you tell our listeners where they can find your work?
Yeah, for sure. I have a Substack. Premium side of the Substack does a lot of minor league stuff. I also have some draft stuff coming out there. YouTube's probably what I've been trying to push most this year, to try to grow on that platform. Lance BROZ. Search my name, should pop up. Twitter is where I promote a lot of my stuff too. Instagram as well. I'm kind of everywhere. I'm trying to do everything, which is hard, as I'm sure you guys know. But But yeah, feel free to check out my other content if you enjoyed my rambling.
We certainly did. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, guys. Take care.
All right.
That does it for this episode of Orioles on the Verge. Bob and I will be back later this week to take listener questions and dive a little bit into the minor leagues. In the meantime, you can find us on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, YouTube, and TikTok. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by Bet Online and part of the Believe Podcast Network.
You know when you're listening to a true crime story that has an unbelievable plot twist that makes you stop in your tracks? That's what our podcast, People Are the Worst, brings you with each episode. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Rebecca. We're identical twins who love true crime cases that make you say, didn't see that coming, and we hate the people responsible for them. Listen to People Are the Worst now on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.